Good evening, and thank you for joining us this evening. As we call this 58th regular session to order, we're going to have the invocation given by Councilmember Shelley McIntyre, and then the pledge to the flag by her guest, Ryan Barnett, who's an Eagle Scout. So if he'd please stand and join us.
We gather together here today intent on doing good work. We seek to represent fairly and well those who have given us this task. May our efforts be blessed with insight and guided by understanding and wisdom. May we always act in accordance with what is best for those who live and work in our beloved city of Hagerstown. Bless this meeting today, all those present, as well as the lives of those we will encounter afterward. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ryan. All right, some quick announcements here. We'll be operating under the rules of procedure adopted by this administration on December 20th, 2016. If you have a cell phone, please put it on mute. All correspondence and distribution to elected officials should be provided to the city clerk and should include a copy for the city clerk for inclusion in the official record. Our next scheduled meeting dates are Tuesday, December 4th and Tuesday, December 11th. They're both work sessions at 4 p.m. And then Tuesday, the 18th is our regular session at 7 p.m. And then Tuesday, the 25th, there is no meeting because that is Christmas. So we have some appointments tonight. Christina Davis to the Planning Commission. Christina Davis, her term to expire October 31, 2019. And Colin Ploskaroo, his term to expire May 30th, 2019. Lou, can I get a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I move for appointments to the Planning Commission of Christine Davis and Colin Ploskaroo for terms to expire for Christina on October 31, 2019, and for Colin on May 30, 2019.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0. All right, have some things here that we're going to do. First is a proclamation for World's AIDS Day. Mike Jones, you're out there someplace in the audience. Come on up.
Mr. Mayor, I have your microphone.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Here you go. Well, 51 weeks. Okay, I have a proclamation for World's AIDS Day, December 1st, 2018. Whereas World's AIDS Day is observed annually on December 1st, and with this year, it marks its 30th anniversary. The observance highlights worldwide efforts to combat HIV/AIDS, and is an occasion to show support for those living with HIV/AIDS and to remember those who have died from the infection. While antiretroviral therapy has transformed HIV/AIDS from a nearly always fatal infection into a manageable chronic condition, HIV remains a global threat, requiring worldwide effort to increase communication, education, and united action to stop the spread of HIV/AIDS. And whereas globally an estimated 36.9 million people are HIV plus, and more than 35 million people have died from the virus, making it one of the most destructive pandemics in history. In 2017, 1.8 million new diagnoses and 940,000 deaths were reported globally. And there was a reduction in deaths by 51% since its peak in 2004. Whereas nationally, more than 1.2 million people live with HIV, yet 1 in 8 do not know they are infected, making the need for routine testing and treatment for those infected vital in reducing the potential to transmit the virus. And whereas the state of Maryland reports 32,982 persons living with HIV/AIDS, with 1,622 of those persons diagnosed this past year. Whereas World AIDS Day serves as a reminder for citizens to educate themselves about HIV, to find out their HIV status through testing, to receive care if infected, and to always demonstrate compassion for those infected and affected by HIV and AIDS. Now therefore be resolved to support the City Council, I, Robert E. Brucci II, Mayor of the City of Hagerstown, Maryland, to hereby affirm its commitment to public health and proclaim December 1st, 2018 as World AIDS Day in Hagerstown.
Just on behalf of Rise Up Hagerstown and Veritas United Church of Christ, to thank you, Mr. Mayor, and City Council for proclaiming today, proclaiming December 1st, World AIDS Day, observed here in Hagerstown.
Well, again, appreciate you coming today and receiving the proclamation. And, you know, it is I have a couple friends who are affected by it. So it is definitely something that we've come a long way and got a long way to go. Okay. All right, now, we also have with us North High and South High. And a little bit about this past Gridiron Championship Classic that was held in the pouring down rain. It was the 62nd year of the city rivalry, and it was tied 30-30 with one tie going into this year's game. South High finally broke that tie, and the final score was South Hagerstown 43 and North Hagerstown 0. You know, I stood there trying to be protected by a tent in the end zone, and with athletic director Peter. And, you know, we thought we were out of the rain, but it didn't matter. I mean, it was just coming in from all sides and leaking through the tent. But I tell you what, it was very wet, very sluggish, a lot of puddles. And watching that football game, probably the number one thing I got out of that entire time was watching these young men on the football field, helping each other up out of the mud and muck. Didn't matter whose team they were, everybody was helping each other. And you know, the score really, to me, didn't matter at that point in time. I saw some great sportsmanship, probably some of the best football that I'd seen. And I want to thank you for that. It was, despite the weather, it was a fantastic night. So, could I please get, I know Coach Staines couldn't be here tonight, but we got Coach Pete Urish. Can you come up? Anybody else you want to bring with you and your players? And Zachary Kiefer from Sunrise Rotary. Paul Crampton couldn't be here this evening either, unfortunately, but we want to thank him and Sunrise for sponsoring the MVP scholarships. So we need to get the North Hagerstown High School MVP is Jacob Connor. Jacob. Jacob, there you are. That's good that you're up here. Yeah. Coach, you want to say a few words?
Well, I wasn't expected to, but I'll do so. I'll do the best I can. I just came from work, came from the weight room, so sorry for the dress, people. I don't feel like I'm dressed for the occasion, but humbly, Jake was one of our leaders of our program for the last 3 years. He's really been in. He was a 3-year starter on the defense, and he was a mainstay, and we just found out last night he's first team all-conference all county with the coaches' vote last night, and he's got a future in football, and we look forward to supporting him as he moves on to future endeavors.
Jake, you want to say anything? Here you go, brother. There you go. Let me put you on the spot. Is that ready?
Okay.
Well, congratulations.
Well, we appreciate you guys being here, and thank you very much. Thank you.
You good, picture, right? Okay, so now I need to get Coach Dave Lawrence. Anybody you want to bring with you? And the South High MVP, Jaswa Sannon. Did I say that right? Cool. Yeah. All right. Come on. You get to hand this one. I want to be a hog, check hog. So anyway, thank you very much for a great game, and you guys, you played some awesome offense and defense both. You know, I got to hear, unfortunately, I work at Hagerstown Ford with Charlie Benson and Dave Sox, and I got to hear about the two games where we lost and you guys lost in like 15 seconds of each game. And get to hear that over and over again, just so you know. Don't let that happen next year, okay? We'll do our best. You want to say a few words?
No, I just wanted to say thank you for having us here tonight. We really did have a great season, and Jay Swab was one of our leaders. He was a 3-year starter for us. You know, and he's got a future in football. And he doesn't know this yet, but he was voted last night as the Offensive Player of the Year for the entire county. That was by our coaches, and you know, we expect big things from him in the future. And again, just thank you for having us here. We really appreciate it.
All right, well, I'm going to hand this trophy off. I'm going to hand this trophy off to you. Turn around here, Eric, you want to get a picture? You and Jason Watson. Okay. Thank you. One, two, three. Okay. All right, next on the agenda are citizen comments. Now, this isn't the public hearing comment time. This is just citizen comments. Looks like we have Raj. Raj, you want to speak both times or only?
Just once, sir.
Okay, we'll wait for you then.
Thank you.
Irving Carr?
Laura.
Laura? You know, I was going to say that, but it looked like a C at the same time.
That's my handwriting. Not your fault, Mayor.
And give us your address.
Yes, of course. Irving Laura, live on 416 Virginia Avenue, just across from City Park. I've been here for a couple years, but like most Americans now, I've lived several places, sometimes overseas too. And I have to tell everyone here, you know, the council, yourself, your administration, you have a good thing going here. You're doing a great job. The wife and I, we see it. Any interaction we have with the administration, with the staff, is always excellent. Doesn't always go our way if we have an issue, but we understand that. And either way, we're heard, and we like what we see here. Also, thumbs up to your IT section there, because wherever I'm at, I try to stream in and watch when I can. So, long-time listener, first-time speaker. So the reason I'm here, it was interesting. I was listening to the Funkstown request for EDUs in your last session, and that just got me thinking, what's an EDU? Why would they have to request it? So I know you have all staff about this, Some members here were even involved with some of the sewer capacity allocation programs back in 2005, yourself included. But from what I've read, I guess, like I didn't know this, but the treated wastewater is put into the Antietam River, Antietam Creek. And of course it's treated, so it's legally, it's okay, it's safe. But it wasn't so around that time frame, around 2005, so we had to implement that sewer capacity allocation program to put us back in line. You know, we don't want environmental issues here, right? And so we were limited in issuance of EDUs, we were limited on overall capacity, a lot of things going. And by 2010, the consent judgment that resulted in that error, I guess, of management, was lifted because our capacity at the wastewater treatment plant was upgraded. However, with your signature, we had a comprehensive plan in place in 2008 to help not only bring us up to standard, but keep us on standard beyond the lifting of the consent judgment. And as I read the plan, and even the modern version called the Vision Hagerstown 2035, it went, you know, it just a very thorough job of writing out where waste management services goes. It was simple for me to read. But throughout the plan, I had trouble seeing where we could just issue EDUs to Funkstown. Again, I'm not subject matter expert of this. I know you have staff for this, but from my reading from it, we were not forced, but no longer forced, but now we have a plan, which means all our development is phased, it's tiered across the city, the corporate limits and beyond. And if we were to look to a map, Funkstown's a great town, but on the map itself, it's literally a black hole on there. Same with Williamsport, because we have no involvement in their waste management. We do in their, obviously, water service, because we have to. They require our help there, but not waste management. And I'm assuming they're under their own agreement on how they distribute their EDUs, how to distribute all that. And again, as I read this, I'm looking at the allocations, and every time a developer, say a developer wanted 40 EDUs, which may be a good amount, it's probably more like 20, they would have to go through all these steps to get this. And I get it, it's a new building, new lines being set up, but there's also rules for existing areas. And one of the few exceptions I see for existing areas involve annexation, because now we're providing all these services, including waste management. And within those exceptions, there's also capped amounts. Again, I'm not a subject matter expert, but my estimation, it exceeds the accepted amount. So 40 EDUs, roughly over 6,000 gallons per day. And the under the accepted amount where you have discretion to give, it's more like 5,000. So that's sort of, it exceeds that amount. And I understand good intentions, we want to help our neighbor. That's why we have memorandums of agreement, of understanding, especially with civics like police officers, fire department, but those tend to be episodic. So the fire comes, the need for law enforcement comes and goes, and then it's resolved. Payment is made between partners there, and it's done. But this is more of a continual process, the waste management. And I think that fully falls into a lot of the rules we have for the comprehensive plan, where if we could treat this like a development. Am I saying annex that section of Funkstown? No, but I do see here where there's very little exception for giving EDU to another town just because it costs that town more money. I did not see that anywhere. Again, not a subject matter expert here. I'm sure there's a lot more under yours and the council's discretion, but what I can see on the plan that's been agreed to by the city, including yourself, all the way back to 2008, I didn't see it. Just trying to be helpful here. I found it interesting. I just found that out. But let me end by saying, once again, you guys are doing a great job. I like living here. Please continue. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We had some North High students that have signed up. You guys, you want to talk about the city market, right? Come on up.
Hello, sir. I am Walter West from the Hospitality and Tourism program from North Hagerstown High School.
I'm Savion Games, and I'm from the Hospitality and Tourism program, and I'm from North High as well.
And we are here today for a goal. We are here to reignite the city, Hagerstown City Market within Hagerstown. That is considered a crown jewel among Hagerstown, and we are simply trying to reignite it by basically getting vendors to come back to the Hagerstown market to make the Hagerstown market look more populated. And me and Savion are project managers of that event. And our goal is to satisfy all the vendors and customers of the market whenever we are hosting it, which is this Thursday. Oh, yeah, okay, yeah. Excuse me, I'm sorry, Saturday.
Like, the reason why we're doing this is because I feel like, in like the total honesty, like city market will become better because you see the younger generation, they're not interested in it, and we want the younger generation to get influent and like bring people to it, because for past years the city market has been like one of the historic landmarks of Hagerstown, but hasn't been like treated like one. So I think the reason why we're doing this is because we want to like spread growth and spread love around the community and make the city market bigger and better.
That is honestly, he put it in perfect words. We are just trying to unite the people and make Hagerstown more connected. We just want to establish a good connection with everybody. There's a lot that's been going on through our world, and we want to make Hagerstown a very good, established connection with everybody.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Megan Ashire. I'm the president at North High.
I'm Josh Clemmer, and I'm the secretary.
So the SGA has kind of been partnering with the Hospitality and Tourism program to help them kind of organize the vendor side of it as well. So what we're going to be doing is a ticket auction, and we've also kind of helped to procure some vendors. So the ticket auction is kind of, we're going to be doing $1 a ticket, 6 for $5, or an arm length for 10, and we've gotten a bunch of donations from Hagerstown, including grocery store gift cards, restaurant gift cards, and a bunch of all the new vendors have donated too.
The reason that the SGA is trying to raise money from this ticket auction is for the North High Be Smart, Don't Start Drugs campaign. And our goal for this year is we want to buy t-shirts for every staff and student at North High, and we want to have them be tie-dyed red and purple. Red, of course, for North Hagerstown High School, and purple for the opioid epidemic in Washington County. Our motto is, if you never start doing drugs, you'll never develop an addiction. Doesn't matter the type of drug, you will never develop an addiction as long as you don't start. The SGA and the Hospitality and Tourism aren't the only programs at North High that will be helping with this. The Educators Rising program will be, they'll be handling a kids corner for arts and crafts for small children, because we want this event to be an event for all ages, for everyone in the family, as well as the North High interactive media productions will be documenting through photo and video. This is really, it's all of North High coming together to help unify and grow the city market. We see the city market as a valuable asset to Hagerstown, and we've seen it fall under the radar in the past couple years, and we want to bring it up. That's basically our goal with this. We see it as it could possibly be a keystone in the revitalization of downtown project.
Great.
So yeah, we would like to personally invite all of the council members to come to the city market on Saturday, December 1st. So this Saturday, it opens at 6 a.m. and it closes at 12. So we have some invitations for you.
Also, this Thursday, us and about 20 other students from North High will be working at the market. We'll be moving things around for better flow of traffic. We'll be getting things finalized. If you want to stop by from 9 to 1, you could see us in action. We do really great things, and we'd love to have you there. And we could give you some more information. You could meet some of the students. I mean, these are great students who are working really hard. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Paula Stotler.
Hi, I'm Paula Stoller. I'm manager of Hagerstown Family Diner, 431 Dole Highway, the old Venice building. I'm here today to talk about zoning. Where the old Diva Lounge was, I would like to open up Hookah Lounge in that part of the Venice. The zoning is a problem with the tobacco store being close to me over in the old Ames Shopping Center, Aldi's, and being close to there to the Diva Lounge. I would like to have the zoning readjusted there, so there's going to be no alcohol involved. We have been a pretty successful business there. It will be 4 years and the 28th of December, and I would like to see if that could be done. We've been really successful there, and my employer is Mediterranean. He's Egyptian, and he has a lot of tie to the Muslim, Pakistan, Middle Eastern, although it would be open to the public, but that is their culture. So I would like to have reconsidered the zoning there, that we could possibly open up a hookah lounge. Again, there's no alcohol going to be involved, because Muslims don't believe in alcohol. Okay? Thank you.
And that's all that have signed up on the list. Is there anybody who wishes to speak who didn't sign? Okay, Ryan, I'm sorry. I figured that you were. Ryan Barnett, go ahead, please.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ryan Barnett, and I am here to talk about my Eagle Project and a major problem that society faces: homelessness. I was invited tonight because of my Eagle Project, which was a new security desk at the Reach Shelter, a cold weather shelter for the homeless. The old desk had a number of issues. It had the volunteers stationed there facing a wall, so they were not as aware of their surroundings as they could be. Furthermore, the security camera footage on the monitors was exposed and could be seen by anybody passing by. My desk was built from scratch and fixed these issues by flipping the orientation around, while providing a much nicer work environment. The Reach Shelter has a special place in my heart because it is also where my brother completed his Eagle Scout project. He built 12 wooden beds for the women's area of the shelter, and I helped him nearly every step of the way. I knew when his project was done that I wanted my Eagle Project to be at Reach too. I wanted to help the homeless get back on their feet. Homelessness is an epidemic that can strike a member of the working class at any time. It can happen without warning, whether it is the loss of job, a late rent, or natural disaster like the wildfires in California that many unfortunate families are suffering from. I'm glad to be doing my part to help those who feel that everything is working against them, yet still have the willpower to want to help themselves, and I hope that you guys feel this passion too. Thank you.
Thank you. Please step up.
I don't know if I signed up on the wrong paper or not.
Are you
Are you Vicki?
Vic? Oh, I'm sorry, Vicki. I jumped right over top of you. Come on up.
I made a special trip to come down here because I have been in contact with city employees for about 10 years, and it's concerning this property at 535, 537 West Franklin Street. I live at 513, and we are now the oldest family that lives in the 500 block. We've been there 46 years, so I feel nobody else has as much invested or care as much as we do about our community right there. And this property has been in such bad need of repair. I had hip replacement done in February, and I had to walk on level ground to exercise. And going up that sidewalk, it ended up tearing up the rubber pads on my walker. And then I had to have knee replacement done in August. So knowing I'd have to get out and exercise again, I called the city in July. And I said, look, I said, they have not done anything with this sidewalk yet. And I said, I want to know, what can be done. Well, an employee came up and he spoke to me and he said, well, I think the city is trying to get in this property. And he said, if they don't, he said, we will end up, we've given them 6 weeks to replace it. Well, here it is 4 months later, and it still has not been replaced. Now, I have a note that I made to myself that in March 3rd, 2010, I had called and complained about the garage roof and the bad need of repair of that in the rear of the property, because every time we had a bad storm, the tiles would blow and wash down into the drain behind my garage, and then it would make my garage get flooded. And then nothing was done again. Matter of fact, there's trees growing up inside the garage. On June 22nd, 2015, well, I had called the Herald Mail, and they had a column called Monday Breakdown. They did a really nice article about that property and what the city was doing to fix it. 2015, here it is 2018. When I walk by, I have to kick bricks out of the way that are coming apart on the front of the sidewalk. I had to move a gutter that had fallen along the sidewalk of the house and put it in the yard. Well, apparently the people who grow the grass or cut the grass ended up moving it to the back porch. I don't know what else to do about this. I have approached so many city employees, and I thought, I'm now bringing it to your attention. Something needs to be done about this property. It's been over 10 years. Come on, folks. I know you do something more than this in other ends of town. I know this is the west end of town, but I care about it. I've lived there 46 years, and I want to see something done about this property.
Kathy, can you get with her and make sure we have her contact information, please? Thank you.
Well, the lady that I talked to this afternoon, she said that there is a Justin Cole, I think, from Code Enforcement, who is supposed to be looking into this, and he's supposed to call me. Well, he did not call me yet. So, I'm to the point I'm tired of phone calls because nothing is getting done with them.
Please make sure Kathy gets your information so that I can have it and
I'm putting it into your hands.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, that was the last person who actually signed up on the sheet. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak that didn't sign up? Okay. So moving on, we have a public hearing, and it's 2018 Land Management Code text amendments. Welcome, Steve. Welcome, Kathy.
Price one tonight. Good evening. For those out there watching by television, my name is Steve Bachmiller. I'm the city's development review planner and zoning administrator.
Oh, I'm sorry. And I'm Kathy Marr, the Director of Planning and Code Administration for the city.
This evening, we have a public hearing for a package of text amendments to the city's land management code. The Land Management Code is the city's regulations regarding zoning, subdivision, and land development, floodplain management, and forest conservation. These used to all be separate ordinances, but were combined into one document several years ago. The planning office staff administer this code on a day-to-day basis to make sure that businesses and residential uses go in appropriate places and existing uses do not exceed what is permissible for their location. There are several boards that are authorized by the Land Management Code and support that code. The first is the Planning Commission, which works with staff on one, review and approval of plans for development using the standards in the code, and input from outside agencies, and 2, consideration of changes to the code or rezonings. And that's one of the things that we're here tonight for, is proposed changes to the code. Another board is the Board of Zoning Appeals, which reviews requests for a variance to the rules of the zoning provision or the approval of special exception uses. The board also reviews appeals of decisions made by the zoning administrator. Part of my job is to administer these ordinances and the zoning code. If someone disagrees with the way I've understood the ordinance, they can appeal my decision to the Board of Zoning Appeals and have the board hear it. Third, the Historic District Commission reviews changes to the exteriors of buildings and properties in the city's 4 historic districts. And then this body here as well, the mayor and city council, review recommendations from the Planning Commission for changes to the code or for rezonings. And ultimately, the approval is by this body, subject to recommendations from the other bodies. How are changes made to the code? Every year, the planning staff reviews inquiries, requests, and concerns that have arisen over the prior year, and we present a proposed package of amendments for the Planning Commission's review. We don't deal with these one at a time, bringing them to you piecemeal, unless it's some sort of emergency situation. Typically, we will gather them up over the course of a year and deal with them collectively, so you only have to deal with it one time a year under normal circumstances. Once the commission finalizes the appropriate city-initiated amendments, the commission holds a public review meeting to gain citizen input. Following the hearing, the commission reviews the input and forwards a recommendation to the mayor and council. The planning commission forwarded the current package to you all on, voted to forward it to you all on October 24th. Staff presents the Planning Commission's recommendations to the mayor and council, and then a public hearing is scheduled. We had a previous work session on this earlier, and tonight we're here for the public hearing that is just previously mentioned. Before we move on, I would like to enter into the record the official file for this package, and also the certificate of advertisement in the newspaper as required by law. How are changes made to the code? Following the public hearing, the mayor and council determine the validity of what has been presented, make changes as appropriate, and then pass an ordinance to amend the code. So after you take your testimony this evening, typically this body will leave the record open for 10 days, allowing folks to provide additional written comment for a 10-day period thereafter. And then at that point, you would schedule work sessions with us as your staff for you all to give us guidance on what you want to move forward with approving changes for and what you do not, and what you might want changed in the proposals. If a citizen wishes to seek a specific amendment to the code outside of the city-initiated process, there is an application that can be reviewed by the Planning Commission, and the same process of public hearings and mayor and council action begins as it would with the city-initiated amendments. So once a year, we do a package initiated internally, but a citizen can propose to this to the Planning Commission, the mayor and council individually through an individual process as well. This moves us on to what changes are proposed in the 2018 package. This is a wide range of minor and more substantial changes to the code intended to serve a public purpose or to clarify existing sections of the code. Basically, it boils down into 2 things. There's sometimes we see things in the ordinance that escape detection that just need to be tweaked or clarified. These are really minor things and typically don't deal with substance. And then there are other things that are more substantive, real issues that need to be developed that would help us, the city, guide development better in the future by significant changes to policy. In this package, we have grouped them all under the following themes. First, protecting neighborhood character and enhancing safety in our community. 2, increasing housing choices and diversity. 3, expanding economic opportunity and permitting greater flexibility in the code. 4, setting clear expectations for the public and investors. 5, improving resiliency from environmental hazards. 6, providing suitable locations for social and medical services at intensities consistent with the surrounding neighborhoods. 7, streamlining the process and cleanups to the code. And 8, updating the on-premise sign regulations.
Okay. Now I'll jump in with the first grouping that we talked about earlier, protecting neighborhood character, enhancing safety in our community. For more detail on the exact wording of these code amendments, you can go to the city's website, and we have a package that you can follow line by line, although it goes by the way, as we're grouped it here, so it's easier to follow along with, but more details in there. What we're showing you tonight is sort of a summarizing and a paraphrasing to make it easier to understand that the legalistic language that tends to be in codes. The first thing that we're suggesting is require a sidewalk between the public sidewalk and entrance doors for commercial development apartment complexes, so you can get safely from the street or from the parking areas to the front door. Define camping and campgrounds. Currently the code does not define that. And then only allow in the agricultural transition zone. Require inclusion of crime prevention through environmental design principles in new development. That's typically you design a project so that it can sort of self-surveil itself to deter crime. Allow natural observation from public and neighboring areas. Make sure there's adequate lighting. Avoid places for people to hide. Avoid placement of features that would allow climbing into buildings. And ensuring there's adequate security cameras for large parking lots. All things so that you don't have to have a police officer every 10 feet. You can design projects so that they help to police themselves. Design standards for parking in the yards of residential development would be require solid paved surfaces or permeable pavers if you want the stormwater to trickle through. Rear yard placement of such parking facilities is preferred, particularly if you have an alley. Some people don't have an alley, so you have to come in from the street. For front yard driveways, there would only be one car width or as wide as whatever garages that you have. Front yard parking pads must be 50% or less of the front yard area. These are typical standards other communities use so that your front yards don't become parking lots. And then allow the zoning administrator to revoke a zoning approval if the owner does not develop or maintain or use the property as it was approved. Any continuation without bringing the property into compliance would be a zoning violation and subject to fines. It's a way to capture the attention of folks who've gotten a project approved for a certain thing and then have decided not to use it that way. And so this is a provision that's proposed for inclusion in the code. The next is increasing housing choices and diversity. The first being currently we allow for mansion house apartments where you could convert a very large home in a few of our zoning districts into apartments. Currently it says if you have 4,500 square foot of a house, then you could do it. And then only the number of units would be only no more than 1 per 1,500 square feet of space in the house. In administering the code, the zoning administrator has found that this is typically not being used because it seems to be a little bit too tough. And so we're suggesting, and also it still would be pre-1956. 1956 is when we first had zoning in the city of Hagerstown. So now we're suggesting that we would allow this use still in the same zoning districts, but if you have 4,000 square feet of a house, which is still a pretty sizable house, and typically it's what our older stock is, and then also allowing the units to be be able to have more units in the house by saying you need to have 1,000 square feet for every unit. They don't have to be 1,000 square foot units, you just can't have more than, like if it was a 4,000 square foot house, no more than 4 units in that house. So it would depend on the square footage. And then another thing we're proposing, sometimes in town we have situations where back in the day, you had to have mom and pop shops on the ground floor. Well, in some neighborhoods, there's not enough traffic going by, it doesn't make sense anymore for the commercial use, so the ground floor tends to stay boarded up. Our code doesn't allow that storefront to be converted into a dwelling unit. We're proposing that if you've got a non-conforming mixed-use building, that you could fill the vacant storefront with a dwelling unit if approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals. Just makes it so we won't have situations like this, which we do have in some locations around town, where it's on a side street and commercial can't thrive there, and so at least they could get an apartment in there. Another increasing housing choice and diversity, redefine rooming house and allow in existing buildings under certain conditions. In 4 of our zoning districts currently, they're not allowed in the zoning ordinance. We have a couple of non-conforming situations existing. This would allow this use to go back into the code. It was in the code years ago, was taken out because of some dissatisfaction with how some of these facilities were being managed in the city. We're proposing to allow it to go back in as an alternative form of housing, but with certain conditions. And the first one is something that's required anyway. You have to meet the fire code and property maintenance code requirements. They're just spelled out in the code so people know more clearly. They don't have to go to multiple sources to figure out what they're gonna need. And then also, something that's being proposed is include the requirement that a 24-hour per day on-site supervisor be in the facility representing the owner, so that we ensure that we'll have good management of these facilities. A maximum of 16 rooming units per facility, except in the commercial general zoning district, there'd be possibility for having more units if you received a special exception from the Board of Zoning Appeals. This is thinking that in the commercial zone, you might have some pretty large buildings that might adapt fairly easily to be a rooming house, but 16 units may be too small for the project to be feasible. Off-street parking requirement would be 1 space per employee on the largest shift and 1 space per sleeping room or 1 space per 2 beds. The next thing would be define group home, halfway house, and alternative living unit, and allow in the following zoning districts under the guidance of what's required by state code. An alternative, state code defines an alternative living unit as up to 3 residents. And per the state code, in the health article, it says, these are considered by the state as being single-family residences, and local zoning must allow them wherever a single-family home is allowed. For small group home or halfway house, that's 4 to 9 residents. Again, they say they consider this to be a single-family home and should be allowed by local zoning anywhere a single-family home is allowed. A large group home or halfway house is 10 to 16 residents, and they consider this to be comparable to a multifamily structure, and local zoning should allow that anywhere multifamily structures are allowed. So we're proposing, as it's spelled out there, to allow these uses in those situations where we allow single-family or where we allow multifamily. Proposing to include an off-street parking requirement, 1 space per employee on the largest shift, and 1 space per sleeping room or 1 space per 2 beds. This would replace 2 existing terms that we use, one being residential facilities with in-house professional care for up to 3 residents with mental and/or physical disabilities, or actually just this one use, and replace it with this new terminology, which matches terminology used by the state.
Okay, we're going to move on to the next section, and that's expanding economic opportunity and permitting greater flexibility in the code. First proposal is to expand the zoning districts within which artist studios are permitted. This would expand to include 8 base districts that are mixed-use, commercial or industrial in nature, plus also they would be amongst those uses that may be permitted in a conversion or a local conversion zoning district. Next would be allow photography studios in the industrial zoning districts and the conversion district. Also, next is change the definition of brew pub to remove the requirement that brewing be an accessory activity, and to allow distillery pubs and wine pubs where brew pubs are allowed. We've had some inquiries about things like brew pubs within the city, specifically within our downtown area, and we found that the way our definitions currently are written, the restaurant use has to be the primary use as far as space goes, and often these types of uses, the brewery is really taking up, or the distillery is taking up more space of the building than the actual restaurant is that it's supposed to be accessory and attached to. So we remove that limitation to make it more flexible for those types of uses to locate in the city. Next is a proposal to modify how the separation of use requirements are measured for multi-use properties such as shopping centers.
And this is the person who spoke during citizen comments, this is the change that's being proposed to address that concern.
Yes. Instead of measuring property line to property line, it would be occupied space to occupied space. The example that was used, they have, they're in the old Venice site, they were prohibited from doing the hookah facility at that location because right across the street is that shopping center that also has a cigar store, I believe it is. It's one of the uses that it says you have to keep the distance from. We measure it from property line to property line, which is basically just that distance of the width of Cleveland Avenue. Now it's the actual use space to the actual use space. We found that the use that was prohibiting them putting the hookah facility into this was all the way at the other end of the shopping center, closer to House of Kobe, which was much longer than was ever really anticipated for a separation requirement. So now we go from property line to property line. If this is adopted, it would be use area to use area.
In those large multi-use properties such as shopping centers.
Next would be to provide more flexibility in the POM district for determining maximum percentage of occupied space allowed for restaurant, retail, et cetera, in office parks. Allow conversion district and local conversion district overlays on eligible properties if building was built prior to 1977 rather than 1956. 1956 was the date we initially set these up for because that was the date of the first zoning ordinance taking effect in the city. But we're finding that there are some buildings in our residential area that, for reasons we're not exactly sure on some of them, were built between 1956 and 1977. It really doesn't make any logic to just exclude them based on a date. So we're moving it up to 1977. 1977 is the date that we typically use any non-conforming use as a proof-back date.
It's when we completely overhauled zoning in the city.
Next would be to amend the definition of religious sanctuary to include wedding chapel, because we have gotten a couple of inquiries about creating wedding chapels in the city. Reduce percentage of construction that has to be underway to prevent a PUD approval from expiring. Moving on, extend the site plan approval period from 2 years to 3 years before it expires if construction does not occur. And part of the motivation for this is that the Soil Conservation District, they made this change, and our thought is we might as well stay consistent with them. It makes it a little bit more developer friendly, but it also makes it more consistent for the developers to know that we and our other agencies are operating on the same time frames. Next would be expand upon waiver provisions granted to the Planning Commission when reviewing subdivisions that basically would provide a list of 5 or 6 specific reasons that the board could entertain a waiver to their design standards. And in an urban, mostly developed environment such as we have here in Hagerstown, this is actually a valuable tool to negotiate improvements or improved plans that may be presented to the city for redevelopment of properties. Next is add multi-purpose arena for sporting events, entertainment, and other assembly events, and allow it in the CCMU, CG, CR, INST, and PUD zoning districts. Moving on to setting clear expectations for public investors. One, when land is purchased or donated for public improvements, variances are not required for the remainder of the parcel if it falls below code requirements. This is kind of a given. This is basically if the city or the state takes land from somebody, the city actually doesn't have to go through a variance process in order to get permission from our own boards to do what we need to do in the public interest. Next is any new parking approved under a site plan must be asphalt, concrete, or similar solid surface if located in the front or side yard, adjacent to a public street, or for use by public. Right now, the wording that we have is stable dust-free surface, well-treated gravel could be a stable dust-free surface, so we're looking to up our standards for areas that are visible from public streets to improve the curb appeal of new development and redevelopment in our community. Next is allow apartment buildings in the CL district in existing and in new buildings. Non-conforming uses cannot be expanded to another property. That's also a given. That's actually a requirement of state law, but occasionally we get questioned about that. And we thought adding this to the ordinance would help cut down on the questions that we receive about that. Detached accessory buildings such as sheds and garages shall not be located in the front of a primary structure. Modified definition of earth tone. Basically, we have a definition of earth tone for the colors of buildings in certain types of developments, and we basically made some adjustments to that definition and also put in a provision that also allows for some accents that are not earth tones, specifically if it's associated with like a business that's going into a site, their branding, that kind of thing. Requires stealth design towers to meet setback requirements for non-stealth design towers. And also would note that this is kind of a patch that we put in temporarily in case something comes up. We are actually looking at completely rewriting our codes associated with with this use, cell towers, in the near future. We're going to start on it in January, but we thought this is a quick patch that needed to be tucked into the ordinance in the meantime.
Yeah, our regs are 18 or 20 years old. They need to be updated.
and this is an industry that changes practically on a yearly basis. So. Require each dwelling to be located on its own lot and each apartment building to be on its own lot. This was an issue that this body asked the Planning Commission to specifically look into because of a certain development that was proposed within the city that put townhouses and single-family homes, multiple buildings, multiple single families, et cetera, on large bulk lots. And the thought was that this is not a type of development that should be encouraged, and this is the approach that the Planning Commission and staff came up with, and that is to write per lot into the use chart. And if it's adopted that way, because it's it's written into the use, the state law does not allow the Board of Zoning Appeals to grant variances to uses. Therefore, the Board of Zoning Appeals will not be able to waive this requirement. Require minimum 20 acres for a PUD instead of 5 acres. Currently, the requirement is 5 acres, but there are so many requirements on them, such as mixture of uses, mixture of housing types, open space, that it's nearly impossible to create an actual PUD on 5 acres anymore. Therefore, the thought is for a truly viable PUD to be considered, it really ought to be at least 20 acres. Moving on to more is, we currently in some zoning districts have minimum square footage area requirements for dwelling units based on the number of bedrooms that are within the dwelling unit. The proposal is to make this universal throughout the city, and also to adopt standards for mixtures of dwelling units with live-work space, and those two sets of thresholds are on the board in front of you. And then improving resiliency from environmental hazards. These are some minor word adjustments essentially to the floodplain management ordinance. First, it would make it clear that site plans, not just subdivisions, must meet floodplain management requirements. 2, require public and private streets designed and constructed as part of a subdivision to have the driving surface above the base flood elevation by at least 1 foot. Currently, they just have to be at floodplain level or higher. So basically, we're increasing the minimum height to 1 foot above floodplain. And then require private streets, driveways, alleys, other vehicle access, and parking areas designed and constructed as part of a site plan to have the driving surface above the base flood elevation, unless approved otherwise by the Board of Zoning Appeals. The Board of Zoning Appeals serves as a appeals board also for our floodplain ordinance. We almost never get variance requests to the floodplain ordinance. I think in my 15 years here, we've had 2. So we just use the Board of Zoning Appeals as the appeals board for that. But basically what this would require, anything that's on a site plan is actually within somebody's property. It's not a driveway or a parking area that the city's going to take ownership of. But the requirement is still going to be that they have to be at least at floodplain level. And I will then hand it back to Kathy.
All right. The next section is providing suitable locations for social and medical services at intensities consistent with the character and density of the surrounding neighborhood. The first proposal is to create a new institutional zone. This would provide locations for institutional uses to serve the community. Variety of public use types would be like schools, community centers, hospitals, parks, nursing homes, etc. In a future comprehensive rezoning, it would be proposed to rezone large-scale institutional areas in the RMOD and the RMED zones to institution. If you look at the city zoning map, it looks like we have just a ton of residential zoning, when in fact we have hundreds of acres that are zoned RMOD and RMED, but they're actually set aside as school campuses, hospital sites like the West Marion Hospital, nursing homes, etc. So we're proposing to create this new zone so that those areas are reflected as being not a residential use at all, but really institutional zones. And then comprehensive rezoning will be the next thing that comes to you from the planning staff and the planning commission. And so that would be proposed that this institutional zone will be part of that process. The next thing would be to modify locations where hospitals and nursing homes are permitted, to remove them from the RMOD, the RMED, the RO, which is the old, like Potomac Street, North and South Potomac Street, kind of where we allow offices and houses, but it's a very dense area. Hospitals really aren't suitable for that. So not in the RO, the CCMU, which is the downtown, and the commercial local zone, but allow it in the RH, which is the residential high intensity zone, the commercial general zone, the commercial regional, professional office mixed use zone, institutional, the new institutional zone, and the IMU zone. then to modify the definition of assisted living facility and create a definition for rehabilitation center and allow both these uses where nursing homes are allowed. We would, by using these two new terms, we delete transitional residential facilities with in-house professional care for up to 3 transitional residents being treated for substance abuse issues and replace it with rehabilitation center, and then delete residential care facility for the elderly and assisted living facility for the elderly and or disabled and replace that with just assisted living facility. Create a definition for outpatient substance abuse center and allow this where nursing homes are allowed. Create a definition for adult daycare with vocational center, allow where light assembly is permitted. Delete the term we currently have of social assistance services for elderly and persons with disabilities and replace it with adult daycare with vocational center. Create a definition, we currently have one of these and it doesn't really fit in the ordinance very well. A continuing care retirement community, which is Ravenwood Lutheran Village in the city. And it's defined as a retirement community with accommodations for independent living, assisted and nursing home care, offering residents a continuum of care. All of the dwelling units are typically owned by the provider. Allow them on a minimum 20-acre tract in our RH, the new institutional zone, and PUD overlay zones. Currently, the one complex we have is on RH zoned land. And then looking at that community and the one out at Robinwood and the one down at Williamsport, and they're all well over 20 acres in size, so this seemed like a good minimum size for this type of development. The next section is streamlining the process and cleanups to the code. There's a lot of really teeny little things that are going on here with this section, but just to give you quickly, removing a requirement for zoning maps to record at the courthouse. This is something in our code. It's not required by state requirement, so what the heck, so we're going to get rid of that. Add or she or her to any references where it's just or he or him. Change references to the preliminary development plan to development plans. It's a change we use terminology-wise. It just doesn't show up in the ordinance, so making the ordinance match what terms we currently use. Increase the non-compliance penalty in the Forest Conservation Code from 36 to 50 cents per square foot. Currently, the penalty is not greater than the fee you pay for complying with the code, which makes no sense at all. So that this would have the penalty be higher than the fee you actually pay because you are complying with the code. And then change the term graphic design. This is a change we made years ago because that's apparently what planners thought was a good idea at the time, but nobody uses the term graphic, so we're going to go back to what the term everybody uses, which is sign. Amend the definition of triplex and quadruplex to reduce confusion with the definition of townhouse. Create a signature block for planning staff on development plans, sketch plans, and site plans, and they require PDF plans of final approved site plans and of final as-built conditions. Provide more direct reference to the landscaping standard regarding landscaping or fences adjacent to streets. Cross-reference requirements for site plan standards to improvements proposed as part of a development plan. Correct notation editing errors for the RO and the POM uses in the use chart. Add car rental facilities to design centers for car sales facilities because they're basically very similar uses, so might as well treat them similarly. Correct references to sketch plan and concept plan throughout the code. That was a fun hunt and peck thing. Make it clear that in the mixed-use district there are minimum and maximum setback area and height requirements. Clarify the use chart to make it clear that auto sales includes new and used car sales because it's a very similar operation, so treat them similarly. Add medium-density residential areas with threshold percentage of 20% to the afforestation and reforestation charts in the Forest Conservation Code to be consistent with the state code. Not sure why our code is not consistent with the state code in this, but we're going to make sure that it is now. Add the buffer landscape standard for development adjacent to a municipal boundary. Sometimes, development occurs right on the boundary, and so we're going to have it so that we would apply the city zone that is comparable to the county zone to determine how much that buffer should be to the development that's just outside the city. Rearrange our fence standards section for better clarity. This doesn't change any of the content. It's just at the serious request of our administrative coordinator who has to explain this to the public. Please make it make more sense when I read it to people. So this is just trying to make it make more sense. It was modified over the years just by adding stuff in, and it's become a bit of a mess.
If you edit and just add stuff in, sooner or later the structure breaks down and you just have to rework the whole thing.
So that's what we've done with the fence standards. Content doesn't change, it's just easier to follow. Create a provision for the planning commission to review plan to add forest conservation areas in the city for, oh, Steve, you want to explain that one?
Yes, we put this in because we're finding a couple of examples where folks are having to comply with either the state forest conservation ordinance or the county's forest conservation ordinance and are looking for properties within the city to actually meet their forest conservation requirements on. This has a tendency to, or it has a potential, I would say, we haven't run into a problem yet, but it has the potential to create a problem where somebody might go in and identify a property that is, they want to use to meet their forest conservation requirements, lock the property up, whereas maybe it's a property that the city believes is preferential for development. So basically it requires before somebody puts a forest conservation ordinance, forest conservation easement on property within the city that they get it approved by our planning commission. That way we have control over other people's ordinances taking priority within our own jurisdiction.
Create a definition for private street to make a distinction with driveway. No change to the prohibition on private streets is currently in the code. Just makes it clear what's the difference between a private street and a driveway. Add live performance theaters engaged in adult entertainment to the definition of adult entertainment business. Correct references to minor site plan and change to minor subdivision as a type of improvements that are exempt from landscaping and parking area design requirements. Correct the use charts distribution of residential uses and mixed-use buildings in the CCMU, the NMU, the RO, the C, the LC, and the PUD. These are an oversight from prior amendments. When we were looking to see where it was appropriate for group homes to go, we were finding all kinds of strange anomalies in the use chart from the addition of new residential uses over the years, and so this is to clean that up.
And moving on to our last section is updating our sign provisions. A few years ago, there was a Supreme Court case, Reed versus the town of Gilbert, Arizona, in which a property owner appealed the town's regulation of certain signs that they were proposing to install, and it went all the way up to the United States Supreme Court. The decision came back mostly in favor of the appellant, and it kind of threw just about every jurisdiction in the country and their zoning codes to figure out whether or not they were Gilbert compliant. And we were no different to that than that. So we started looking at it. Also, when I attended the APA conference last year, I also went to a couple of classes on it. Unfortunately, the direction that everyone received from the Supreme Court was a little muddied, so it took a little bit of interpretation. But basically, it boils down to content of signs. And as a result, everybody had to go back and look at their codes to make sure that their sign regulations deal with things that are within zoning, such as size, location, number, etc. Things that are typically addressed with zoning, but not to content. The decision is not completely take content out of it, but it severely restricts what content can be taken into account when creating a sign ordinance. So I went and looked at the ordinance that Gilbert adopted after they lost at the Supreme Court, figuring who better to write a Gilbert compliant ordinance than Gilbert themselves. And the town of Gilbert, which I think is about a quarter of the size of Hagerstown, had about a 60-page sign section. I said, well, there's no way we're going to do that. But what we did is we took the principles, we took the expectations of that and wove those into our existing sign section of our zoning ordinance. As far as what would change, basically it deals with content and things associated with temporary signs, signs on private residential property. It really doesn't change anything that we're used to as far as the regulation of signs in our commercial, industrial, and institutional areas, as far as size and things like that. So that stuff really isn't going to change, but it's going to be more associated with limiting the things that we can regulate as far as content on those signs.
And there were some changes that were unrelated to Gilbert, like on this side.
Yeah, there's some things that we did add as well, such as modifying prohibition of solid background window signs on doors to state such signs must not cover more than 50% of the glass surface. So there's some clarifications. As part of the Gilbert, we established a maximum no more than 3 historic interpretive markers on a building or parcel. We also further clarified theater marquee and gasoline price signs, because there are certain exceptions written into our ordinance for those types of uses, or those types of signs. We also exempted street number addressing from sign area maximums. Street addresses really aren't signs technically, and they're required for public safety. Clarify that sign area maximums apply to all projects, not just ones that need a site plan. Therefore, whenever a sign comes in, for somebody retrofitting a property with a sign, it applies to them in addition to those that are being regulated as far as the site plan being processed through our office. Also, it require a landscaping plan for freestanding signs. One of the things that we did on this is to create a more detailed purpose and intent section to justify the types of regulations being put in place. Me personally, I'm not too much into voluminous purpose sections in sections of zoning ordinances, but in this case, in order to come up with the regulations we did to be Gilbert compliant, we did expand the purpose section at the beginning of the sign section to state the specific reasons why we have sign regulations. Also, it would allow each dwelling unit to have one permanent sign, provided it is not a commercial advertisement for a home occupation or an off-premise activity. And beyond that, there would be no limitation on content. So you can have your sign, and if you want to have that sign say something, some social issue like save the whales or whatever, that would be okay, but also that's your same amount of square footage that you're allowed for if your property's for sale. For sale, you have to pick your why you got your property for sale, whether or not you want to have your for sale sign or your save the whale sign, essentially. This gets back to the heart of Gilbert in that it regulates size, location, number, et cetera, and stays mostly away from content.
This is actually where the for sale signs come into play.
Okay, that's correct. There's a complete revision of the permitted temporary sign section that are allowed on the property. 3 signs. There'd be 6 square feet maximum per sign for dwellings, 32 square feet maximum for non-residential enterprises, and these are temporary signs, and that would include for sale signs. So I have to correct myself from my prior statement as far as the content of the residential signs. Temporary construction and development signs would be a maximum of 100 square feet total on such signs for per public street frontage. These are the signs that you would see on a construction site, coming soon, new library, and it has like the architect and the contractor, et cetera. So the limitation on those.
And this is all because typically in our ordinance and other codes, you tend to have a list of, you say temporary signs are not permitted except for these types. And so you list a few that's saying, okay, these temporary signs we allow and we just don't really regulate them. And the Gilbert case said no, because the person who brought the case, they weren't on that list, and they didn't like the fact they weren't on that list. And the Supreme Court said, yes, you can't do that kind of thing and say, we're going to exempt you just because of what your content is. So that's why we've had to then, instead of saying, okay, we exempt for sale signs, we exempt construction development signs, we're having to say, all right, this is how many signs you can have, because we can't just say, we exempt them.
So if you have a campaign sign that's 3 by 3, which is 9 square feet, that's not allowed on a residential property.
It's our understanding that political temporary signs would be covered by this, yes.
So you can't support 4 candidates, only 3?
You have to pick your favorite 3.
And you can't have, it can't be larger than 2 by 3.
Yeah, no more 4 by 8 sheets of plywood signs.
Right.
Yeah.
No
And
4 by
residential.
4s.
And I would note this is a public hearing on staff recommendations, not
I was just
necessarily
asking a
what we're
question.
going to do.
Planning commission.
Just trying to clarify, that's all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm assuming we're going to have some work sessions.
I would think so.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead, continue.
And it's fortuitous that we had this after the election.
Yes.
let's see, temporary banner signs for commercial activities, you're limited to one sign. There are certain size limitations, which are on the board up there. Off-site temporary signs permitted in any zoning district. One sign minimum must be on a property that's minimum of 1 acre parcel, 32 square foot minimum size of sign, and 1 year time limit. And this is actually kind of where the appellant in Reed versus Gilbert was coming from with their appeal through the court system to the Supreme Court. So that's the overall sign. So it mostly deals with temporary signs in residential areas, negating content exceptions. But as far as what we typically see for a maximum size of a new sign today in our commercial and industrial districts, that really isn't going to change. And did we enter the 4C letter?
No, we didn't.
Okay, we did receive a letter today from Frankie Corsi, who has interest in the property in the IR district. Copies were provided to you today. He would like the mayor and council to consider adding hair and nail care stores, basically barber shops, beauty shops, in the IR zoning district. So we provided that letter to you today. Typically, as far as what happens in the next steps, typically this body will leave the record open for 10 days. So if folks want to follow up with additional comment in writing within the next 10 days, they have the ability to do so and have this body take that into account. Following the public hearing tonight, the mayor and council will review input from the public at a future meeting, and proposed amendments are finalized. Once you all are happy with those things that you want to move forward with and what you don't being edited out, then the mayor and council will introduce and later approve an ordinance to amend the code. The approved ordinance goes into effect 30 days after approval. And at that point, the code is now amended, and the proposals that we're discussing here tonight, those that would be approved, would take effect. The full text of this package that we just went through is on the city's website and the planning department's, planning and zoning department's webpage. They can be downloaded in their detail, so if you want to see the nuts and bolts of it all, do go to our webpage, hagerstownmd.org, planning and zoning. People want to email in comments. Our email is planning@hagerstownmd.org. Our administrative manager, Debbie Calhoun, her extension is 138 if folks would like to call in as well. And that's all we have.
Any questions from the council for staff at this point?
Couple of things. Thank you, number one, for all the detailed work on this and trying to reword everything and make it more clear. Just had one comment on 4.1, Article 4 zoning, the variance exception for public improvements. If you could just take a look at the wording on that. It looks like the intent should be that when the city or the county does something to change the lot standards to make them minimal or less than what's otherwise permitted. It seems like the wording should be neither the property owner nor the city, county, or state shall be required to apply for and obtain variances. We're not expecting the property owner to have to obtain variances. The way I read it, it seems like it should have a,
Neither the property owner nor the city, county, et cetera. So we need to add the word neither.
I think that would make it more clear.
4.1. Okay.
And then also thank you for doing the clarification on the setback on wireless communication facilities and the height restriction standards. I know that was an issue of consternation to a lot of people, and it wasn't clear in the code before, so I think this makes it clear. I would also encourage, and Kathy, you said the whole cellular communications section needs to be rewritten. I agree 100% with that. I just wanted to read the one thing here, this is from the Maryland Municipal League, and the MML's sole legislative priority for 2019 is the preservation of local authority over the siting and aesthetics of small cellular tower infrastructure. And they're talking about the new 5G technology that's coming out. And their concern is that the FCC has adopted an order that has preempted local governments in several areas of the small cell field. It basically preempts local governments in almost every aspect, including important safety and aesthetic components such as zoning and right-of-way access. And so the concern there is that municipalities are losing or could lose control. And there's two bills. There's Senate Bill 1188 and House Bill 1767 were introduced to give the wireless communications industry that permission to basically override local zoning rules. So when we're rewriting our wireless communications zoning and right-of-way access and all that, yes, we need to look at the big cell towers and everything else and the stealth towers and all the things that we've had the issues with this past year. But keep in mind, that's old technology. It's on the way out. And the new thing that's ramrodding its way in is the 5G stuff. And that's where we could lose control over what things look like in town here.
And it's my hope your 2019 package will be a lot thinner than this. We can hope.
Anybody else?
Thank you.
We say that every year, though.
I just have a comment about the rooming house change, which I probably am going to be the one person up here, but I'm going to say it anyway. I disagree with the 24-hour day supervision. I understand why we would want to put that in there, but I think it's going to make it too limiting. And if we're going to change and allow rooming houses to somewhat address the homelessness issue and the housing issue that we have, I think that that's going to make it too difficult, as well as the parking requirement. One space per employee and then one space per room, I think it's just going to limit it too much, and we're not going to accomplish what we intend to accomplish if we put that restriction on it.
All these things are, and just so you know, I have a suggestion that we have a work session on the 11th, which is 14 days from today. So, and we can go over some of these issues. A couple were very pressing, one in particular. So. Okay, thank you. We're going to open it up now for public comment, either for or against, either way you want to look at it, for the public to speak on these amendment changes. I have a sign-up sheet. The first one to sign up was Raj.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. We're gonna do things differently today. I'm gonna clap. You guys are gonna stand up, because I'm thanking you for knocking out the hotel licensing fees. Please stand up.
Please stand up. Come on, stand up.
Stand up, everybody. Come on.
Thank you, Raj.
Awesome job. Awesome job. You heard the young man about the REACH program and the seniors from North High. Everybody has good things to make the city go forward. Likewise, the rooming house, which I'm proposing for the towers, would be beneficial to Hagerstown. Mr. Mayor, I'm not here to take money out of Hagerstown. I keep putting money back in. Just recently, this Black Friday, I burnt all my credit cards, $40,000 worth of purchase for the Garden Plaza. Same thing with one of our hotels, actually has entire roof full of solar panels. So it's not my intention to take money out of the city. I'm putting money back in. It's hard to find money, and banks are very hard once it comes to Hagerstown. And when your zoning ordinances are so tight that I can't even open up a lemonade stand next to a pet cemetery, it's hard to find money. And thank you for the 24-hour thing. This cell phone never leaves me. It's like the president's football. It's with me 24/7, even in courtroom today. It was going off. I was warned. So, again, thank you. I do things differently, Mr. Mayor and council. So please be on my side when it comes to vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Raj. Anybody else? No one else has signed up, but anybody else who wishes to speak, please step up now and give us your name and address. Mr. Lahr?
I did sign up, but I crossed out because I hadn't read the code adjustments. I did have a chance. Thanks you for that presentation. Informative. I have a couple of just questions. By the way, again, Irving Lara, 416 Virginia. I'm pro the amendment. It sounds good to me. Everything looks logical. Two questions, though, I had. I saw the temporary signage. I believe it concerns commercial properties, about the temporary stuff. And you had a picture of inflatable objects for advertisement, even ones that didn't actually have any text on it. And then you moved on to residential signage, limiting to 3. And I was wondering, does that apply to, it's that time of season where everybody puts this stuff out on their lawn. So it could be like a Christmas vacation, and you can have a resident with Frosty out here, Santa inflatable, Merry Christmas sign up. I'm not sure if that exceeds it. Is that included? I don't know. It just came to me. It might come to somebody else. Consider it to be signs. You don't consider it to be signs. Okay. Because the graphic did show it as such for commercial, the inflatable things. Okay. Easy deal. So, I mean, I don't plan to, but somebody I'm sure, and I've already seen some properties with all that stuff out. The other thing was the mansion over flat residences. So I live across from City Park, and a lot of those houses, my house that I purchased was like that. It was split up into apartments, multiple residents, and I think the code does a good job of addressing all that. However, I know for a fact, at least in my block, they've also turned the garages into apartments. And I'm not sure that the new code is addressing that per se. I see how it's written. It's talking about the primary building. I'm not sure if it's addressing the multiple residents, multiple apartments in these double garages, single garages they have out there. So those are just questions I had. Again, looks like a good code. I'm for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Steve, you want to close out?
For everybody who's watching out there in TV land, nobody has to worry about their Christmas decorations. If they are not advertising a business per se or a specific activity other than just commemorating the season, they are not signs. However, a temporary sign that has, Alex, who used to be in our office, actually had this long technical silly term for these one-up wavy man fan signs. Those are advertising an activity or a business. They would be subject to the temporary sign thing. And we actually have existing provisions in our ordinances, I believe, that severely limit things that move, flash, et cetera, when it comes to signage and parading. Anyways, that's really not anything new.
So we'll leave the record open for 10 days. Take any written testimony. So anything else from the council? If not, we'll close this public hearing. Okay. And now we're moving along to the city administrator's comments.
Just a reminder that this Friday night is the annual City Park Light Up Night from 6 to 9. So a lot of good activities, fun activities for family and children.
Stole my thunder.
That's right.
Thank
That's
you
all
so
there.
much. Mr. Elshire?
I don't have anything.
Austin?
I'll steal your thunder again. Saturday is the Chris Crandall Market, so.
That's at 12 o'clock. I'll beat you to that.
Okay.
Is that it? Emily?
Just sorry I was late. I am not winning Mother of the Year award today. My daughter is a competitive inline skater and has practice tonight, and her skates were in my trunk in the basement of City Hall. So sorry about that. And today the county celebrated the outgoing county commissioners, and I just wanted to take a second to thank John Barr, because John has been a great commissioner and asset to the city of Hagerstown particularly. He's always been supportive of us, not only with his business and his personal role, but in his commissioner role as well, and as he served as the president of MACO. So I appreciate his service and thank him for his time in public service.
Lou?
And nothing tonight, Mayor, thank you.
Shelley?
I thought it was extremely exciting to see all of the youth represented here, which makes the Youth Advisory Council presentation next week just a little bit easier. Ryan Barnett is not only, getting his Eagle Scout, but he won the 2019 National Merit Scholarship Commended Student because of his PSAT scores, which were among the top 50,000 of 1.6 million people in the country. So between that and, of course, the city market, which is extremely close to my heart, to watch all of those kids get passionate, it just is super exciting to watch the civic engagement that the youth can create between the connection, just like they said, between the city and the community. So it was really heartwarming, I think. So that's it.
Thank you. All right. Everybody's pretty much stated everything, so we're going to move on to adopting the minutes of October 2nd, 9th, 16th, and the 23rd.
Mayor, hereby move for the approval of minutes as presented from the Mayor and Council meetings held on October 2, 9, 16, and 23, all of 2018.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Consent agenda?
Mr. Mayor, hereby move that all the consent agenda be approved as presented.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. No unfinished business. Under new business, approval of owner's consent for annexation of Foggy Bottom Farm and other lands.
Mr. Mayor, I hereby move for mayor and council authorization as the city being the owner of 11.934 acres of land, more or less, also known as the Waters property or Foggy Bottom Farm, for the mayor to sign on behalf of the mayor and city council the document identified as consent of property owners for the purpose of initiating the annexation of that property and others into the corporate limits of the city of Hagerstown.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Signed. And introduction of an annexation resolution.
Mr. Mayor, I hereby move that the mayor and city council introduce an annexation resolution for an annexation known as the Foggy Bottom Farm and other lands for 3 properties located between Antietam Creek and Yale Drive. The portion of property to be annexed is approximately 101.03 acres in size and is intended to be added to and made part of the adjacent municipal lands.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Adoption of an annexation plan.
Mr. Mayor, hereby move for the mayor and city council to adopt an annexation plan for the Foggy Bottom Farm and other lands annexation A-2018-01.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Introduction of an annexation resolution.
Mr. Mayor, I hereby move that the mayor and city council introduce an annexation resolution known as the Antietam Creek Bed Annexation. The portion of property to be annexed is approximately 1.47 acres in size and is intended to be added to and made part of the adjacent municipal lands for the purpose of creating logical and regular municipal boundaries in conjunction with the annexation of adjacent lands incorporated into the city through case number A-2018-01.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. And the approval and annexation plan.
Mr. Mayor, I hereby move that the mayor and city council adopt an annexation plan for the Antietam Creek bed annexation.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Introduction of an ordinance entering into an agreement for the provision of sanitary sewer between the city of Hagerstown and the town of Funkstown.
Mr. Mayor, I hereby move that the mayor and city council introduce an ordinance entering into the agreement for the provision of sanitary sewer between the city of Hagerstown and the town of Funkstown, Maryland. The reference parcel is within the corporate boundaries of the town of Funkstown and identified as being all of LIBOR 1246 folio 983 containing 44.11 acres.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Introduction of an ordinance authorizing acceptance of a deed in lieu of foreclosure for 117 South Locust Street.
Mr. Mayor, hereby move for the mayor and city council to introduce an ordinance authorizing the acceptance of a deed in lieu of foreclosure for the property located at 117 South Locust Street. This property was acquired and sold by the city through the CDBG homeownership program, and the city remains the primary mortgage holder after providing homebuyer financing to the current owner. The current owner has vacated the property with a remaining balance on the mortgage note and has asked the city to accept the property in lieu of foreclosure. All deed in lieu of foreclosure documents for the property are attached.
Second.
Discussion.
Yes. So just a note, because we got a couple of these here, and I don't really take any ownership of the idea. I think this is an idea that was sort of put out there, whereby everybody recognizes that we have a number of properties within the city, the first of which are the easy ones. They're the ones that we own, that we've attempted to go through a process of obtaining and converting into some form of home ownership, and putting back into the market for folks to afford that purchase. And frankly, the vehicle to do so, the economies just weren't there over time for some properties. But everybody recognizes that there's those properties out there that fit this bill, that provide this opportunity. And so, you know, we sat down, and I thank staff for that, for working with the Housing Authority, and I thank the Housing Authority for volunteering to become sort of that vehicle to operate as that intermediary, to take these properties, take ownership of them, fix them up to the degree they need to be, and then put them back into the market, and identify folks, frankly, through programs that they work through, that they can then extend this opportunity of home ownership to. I think it's exactly that type of measure, and we heard two examples of it here this evening. One is the lady that spoke of the concern she has with the vacated property on West Franklin Street. And everybody in this city can probably recognize there's properties out there that are in this need of either demolition or conversion because they're being neglected. That, I truly believe, is the better opportunity that we have to get people into better living conditions. I do not believe that converting hotels into long-term rooming facilities that were never intended to operate as such is good for this city. I will never believe that. I think that this is the way that we should be going and investing our resources in.
Anybody else? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Introduction of an ordinance authorizing the sale of property located at 441 North Jonathan Street.
Mr. Mayor, I hereby move for the mayor and city council to introduce an ordinance authorizing the sale of city-owned property located at 441 North Jonathan Street to the Hagerstown Revitalization Corporation for the sum of $1. The HRC, a subsidiary of the Housing Authority of the City of Hagerstown, will carry out additional renovation activities to revitalize the property with the eventual goal of homeownership occupancy. The sale will be in accordance with all the terms and conditions outlined in the attached purchase agreement.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Introduction of an ordinance authorizing the sale of property located at 443 North Jonathan Street.
Mr. Mayor, I hereby move for mayor and city council to introduce an ordinance authorizing the sale of city-owned property located at 443 North Jonathan Street to the Hagerstown Revitalization Corporation for the sum of $1. The HRC, a subsidiary of the Housing Authority of the City of Hagerstown, will carry out additional renovation activities to revitalize the property with the eventual goal of homeownership occupancy. The sale will be in accordance with all terms and conditions outlined in the attached purchase agreement.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Introduction of an ordinance authorizing the sale of property located at 212 to 214 North Jonathan Street.
Mr. Mayor, I hereby move for the mayor and city council to introduce an ordinance authorizing the sale of city-owned property located at 212, 214 North Jonathan Street to the Hagerstown Revitalization Corporation for the sum of $1. The HRC, a subsidiary of the Hagerstown Housing Authority, the city of Hagerstown, will carry out additional renovation activities to revitalize the property with the eventual goal of homeownership occupancy. The sale will be in accordance with all terms and conditions outlined in the attached purchase agreement.
Second.
Discussion.
Just one last point. A lot of folks ask, well, why can't we do this with all of these properties? And as I know, the reality is most of them are privately owned. And as council pointed out earlier, there is a new board of commissioners incoming, and I believe that one of the first orders of business for this body is to impress upon that new body the dire need that we have to get these properties that are privately owned and vacant and being neglected off of the courthouse steps and back into some type of ownership to get these programs rolling for some of these private properties that frankly nobody wants at this point.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Approval of resolution, memorandum of understanding with the Hagerstown Housing Authority for environmental review management.
Mr. Mayor, I hereby move for mayor and city council to approve a resolution authorizing entry into a memorandum of understanding with the Housing Authority of the City of Hagerstown. This MOU is required to formalize the city's partnership with the Housing Authority for federal environmental review management as required by the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development. The MOU is attached.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Approval of resolution, memorandum of understanding, Washington County Police Academy.
Mr. Mayor, I hereby move for mayor and council approval of a resolution approving the memorandum of understanding with the Washington County Sheriff's Department and the Hagerstown Community College for the purposes of establishing a joint Washington County Police Academy. The term of this agreement shall be for a period of 1 year from January 1st, 2019, and will automatically renew unless otherwise terminated, set forth hereinafter.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Excuse me. Approval of resolution authorizing financial incentive agreement between the City of Hagerstown, Maryland, and 339 Antietam LLC.
Mr. Mayor, hereby move for mayor and city council approval of resolution authorizing the city to enter into a financial incentive agreement with 339 Antietam LLC in connection with its renovation project at 28 East Baltimore Street to be paid for from the general fund economic incentives line item.
Second.
Discussion. I'll just add that this is one of those many projects that the City of Hagerstown partners with a private entity to create something great. So, and we get questioned about it all the time, why we don't have incentives for this, incentives for that, and we have so many incentives, and unfortunately, people just at times don't take advantage of it fully, so. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Approval of noise ordinance exemption for High Rock for Crumpy's Donut Drop.
Mr. Mayor, I hereby move that the mayor and council approve an exemption from the City of Hagerstown's noise ordinance under section 155-5 of the Code of City of Hagerstown for the High Rock Crumpy's Donut Drop on December 31st, 2018.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Approval of disparate funding agreement.
Mr. Mayor, I hereby move the mayor and council approval of a disparate agreement which is required for a JAG grant that HPD approved and received. The Washington County Sheriff's Office and Hagerstown Police Department received funding for crime reduction initiatives, efforts under the local Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance JAG grant due to the fact that Washington County has been identified as a disparate jurisdiction by the Department of Justice this year. Hagerstown Police Department is required to facilitate their portion of the funding through our BJAG grant. The county and the city shall accept the amounts of $12,563 for Washington County and $21,098 for the city as allocated under the local JAG award for FY 2017.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Amendment of the city's water and wastewater policy.
Mr. Mayor, I hereby move that the mayor and city council approve the attached amended City of Hagerstown water and wastewater policy. This amendment adds a 10th exception for connection of city water to essential public services provided by a government body. Under this exception, the county commissioners or other affected government agency must provide a recommendation for award of the exception for an essential public service, and the utilities director must provide a recommendation as to whether the water system can meet the average day, peak day, and fire flow requirements for each request for service. If water system upgrades are required to meet average day, peak day, and/or fire flow, all costs for upgrades will be the responsibility of the agency requesting service as approved by the city's utilities department. For requests outside the county designated urban growth area or outside priority funding areas, the request for service must first receive approval from the administrative authority of the county water and sewer plan.
Second.
Discussion.
Two items. One, I will not be voting in favor, in part because I don't believe that we have effectively defined the essential part of essential public services. And number two, I feel that when we do this outside of that defined area that we feel our services can adequately provide for over the foreseeable future, if we're going to push that bubble out, so to speak, to this large area that we've identified, that somewhere we should have to pull part of that bubble in to account for the fact that we're facilitating service in to a new area outside of the area we've defined.
Anybody else? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion carries 4-1. Approval of mayor and city council goals and priorities for 2018 through 2020.
Mr. Mayor, I hereby move for mayor and council approval of the attached goals and priorities for 2018 through 2020. The goals and priorities outline the mayor and council's vision and mission for Hagerstown, along with the goals and objectives that will guide the city's current and future focus and work plan through this administration. The goals and priorities will be reviewed on a regular basis and possibly updated by consensus of the mayor and city council.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. And the approval to renew citywide mowing contract.
Mr. Mayor, we move the mayor and council to authorize and approve the renewal of the city-wide mowing contract for the contract term of March 15, 2019 through December 15, 2019. This is year one of 2 optional one-year renewals. The total contract amount is $111,057.40 as defined by the attached table.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. And with that, we're adjourned. Thank you.